So yesterday I was slightly, it took slightly longer than I expected, so I did not finish talking about the macroscopic approach. So the beginning of this lecture will be about the macroscopic approach, and then I will discuss the microscopic approach. So yesterday I talked about the empirical measure of the current. So, actually, if you take a problem with a system with two reservoirs at two different densities, or even at equal densities, then the goal of computing the large deviation function is to calculate the probability that there is a total number of particles Q crossing the system during a certain time t, and you expect it to, in the long time limit, to be of this form. And this is the large deviation function that you want to try to compute. And in fact, using the macroscopic fluctuation theory, then there is a way to compute it, and which is the following, which is just using the actions that we discussed yesterday. So it will be minus L, integral from 0 to t over L squared, integral from 0 d tau, integral from 0 to x, and then there is a current plus, so this is Fick's law, and this is this 2 sigma of rho. Okay, so the way to compute it is given by this expression. In fact, here, if I talk, if J is Qt over T, it is of this form, so there is L times J. And so, in principle, J of X depends on tau, rho of X depends on tau, and then what you want to do is to find the optimal functions J and rho such that the integral of J to Q over time. So you have an optimization problem, and usually this optimization problem is a difficult problem, but if you assume that the optimum is given if J, which does not depend on time, okay, if J does not depend on time, automatically it does not depend on space because of the conservation law, because if you had a constant current somewhere and a different constant current elsewhere, then particles would accumulate. So if you assume that J does not depend on time, then J does not depend on space ever, and then you just need to find the optimal density profile here, which itself does not depend on time. And yesterday we saw that this is just a classical mechanical problem that one knows how to solve. And so when one can get the profile, I am not going to do this calculation, but it's very straightforward calculation. And from this straightforward calculation, you can obtain this large deviation function. It's really, it's just algebra to do it, and using what one learns about classical mechanics. Okay, so at this stage I want to make a remark because there is a problem which is even simpler than this one. So this one somehow it's fully solved because it's only, you only need to find the optimal time-independent profile, and once you have done that, the problem is solved. And so it's why one can compute all the cumulants that I showed the other day in my first lecture. Now, if you ask about the empirical measure of the density, it's even easier. Measure of the density. So if you say that you want to know the probability that over a long time window, what you see is a profile rho of x, which is not the steady state profile, or it could be also, but an arbitrary profile. So you just take a certain time window, and then you ask, what's the probability of observing this empirical density profile? Then, again, you can use this formula. Now, again, if you assume that the optimum here is time independent, which is not always, which might not be always true, but under this assumption, you put rho tilde here. Now, if rho does not depend on time, then j cannot depend on x. You have always this relation, d rho over d tau plus dj over dx equal 0. This is a conservation law. So if the rho does not depend, if this rho does not depend on time, then if the optimal rho does not, j does not depend on space. So here, this is just a constant. So you put just rho tilde in this formula. It becomes just a quadratic function of a single number j, and you optimize over this quadratic number, and then you get the empirical measure for the density. So it's even a simpler calculation because you don't have to find to find a profile, you have just to find a single number. Again, all this is true under the assumption the optimum is time independent, and you see, there might be phase transition, in fact, that I am going to discuss just in a short moment, where the optimum becomes time dependent. Now, before I say that, I want to discuss very briefly what you can do in higher dimension. So there are a number of works in higher dimension. Here I just want to mention one result. This is action, macroscopic fluctuation theory that you have here. The action will become, if you are d dimension, then the current will become a vector. So you would have exponential minus integral over space, integral over time. And then you would have a vector here plus d of rho, a certain gradient of rho, so everything becomes a vector here, and 2 sigma. So even if you assume, so imagine a situation like this, you have a system, now it's, for example, 2 dimension. Here you have a contact at density ρ1, here you have another contact at density ρ2, and then you want to ask what's the probability that there will be a certain flux of current through the system. And a priori, it's not like in 1 dimension, even if you assume that the j is time independent, still the current will depend on space in more or less complicated way, and so you have to find the optimum here, and it looks a difficult task to do, but in fact in some work with Ackermann, Spielberg, and Thierry Bodino, we were able to solve this problem in arbitrary dimension, and in fact it turns out that the answer, the optimal density profile, can be understood in a rather simple way. And the way it is given by the following. Imagine that I have found the optimal profile in 1 dimension. Of density in 1 dimension. So it would be, say, the rho star would be the solution in 1D. Then the optimal profile here is given by the following, by rho of x and r, which is, okay, the rho at position r for the optimal profile in d dimension will be given by rho star of x of r, where x satisfies the Laplace equation. So Laplace of x, Laplacian of x and r is 0, with x, so this point, let me call this region R2, and this R1, and with x of R2 is 1, and x of R1 is 0. So if you solve first this problem, finding the solution of this Laplacian for this geometry, and then you construct the density in d dimension by this formula. This is the density in 1 dimension. Then you get the optimal profile there, and so somehow you can calculate the large deviation function. Okay, so one of the last things I want to mention, which is not an easy thing, is to know whether the assumption that I discussed is valid or not. Whether, assuming that the optimal density profile is time independent and the optimal current is time independent, is it valid? And I would say that from the point of view of a physicist, that's okay, maybe I shouldn't erase that, but from the point of view of the physicist, that's a difficult thing to do. The first thing you can try is first you can, so let me, phase transition. Okay, so from time independent to time dependent optimal profile. So really, the thing you want is to find the optimum of this, given, for example, the fact that the integral of j is fixed, takes some certain value j1, and to optimize this over all the profile rho of x and 2 and j of x and 2. This constraint. This is really the only thing you want to do. And the first thing to say is that, but as in most problems in statistical physics, even when you do mean field, trying to see where a first order transition is located, usually you cannot locate it just because it's a nonlinear problem. So trying to find the first transition is difficult. So first order transition is difficult to find. So you cannot tell whether there is or there is not. Maybe you can prove that there should be one, but to locate it, it's, I don't know any tool to do it. Now, if you try to see whether there is a second order transition, then what you want to do is to say that j of x and tau will be maybe something which is independent of time. Now, in one dimension, if it's independent of time, it's automatically independent of space also. But okay, so but plus some small perturbation which is time dependent. And if it's a small perturbation, you want to expand it in Fourier modes. So you would say, for example, plus epsilon j2 of x cosine omega t, maybe plus phi. And then you would do the optimal profile. You would say rho of x and tau is equal to some rho star of x, the optimal profile you had without any time dependence, plus epsilon rho 2 of x cosine of omega t or tau plus phi prime. And then you put that into the action, you expand to second order, and you try to see whether you get a low cost doing that. But even that is very difficult. And as far as I can tell, if you take an arbitrary diffusive system in one dimension, usually you cannot even locate. Trying to make this perturbation, you cannot really see where it becomes unstable, the constant solution becomes unstable. So even that, in my opinion, is not a solved problem at the moment. And the only case where you can do it are on the ring geometry. And on the ring geometry, the main advantage is that when the solution is time independent, then rho star is itself a constant. And so really, when you do an expansion in Fourier modes, you can do the calculation and locate where is the phase transition. But otherwise, in systems, open systems with the two boundaries, I don't know that that it is possible to tell where a second order phase transition takes place.
Around phase transitions, is that your kind of?
So you are looking for a situation where on one side of the phase transition they are time independent, on the other side they would become time dependent. And if they become time dependent and it's a second order transition, then you would expand in Fourier modes in time and in space, and you'd want, for example, to find what is the frequency which is selected or things like that. But as far as I can tell, for open system, one doesn't know to do that. Okay, the order parameter would be the amplitude of the oscillation. You see, you would go from a situation, for example, where you could go from a situation where the thing is time independent to a situation where it becomes time dependent, and the order is the amplitude of this dependence. Sorry?
Well, what is the source of this frequency? I mean, if you had an external biasing with the AC field, I understand this.
Yes, okay, so the case is, okay, so it could happen at a finite frequency. Okay, there is an example I have in mind that I can tell you in a minute. It could happen also at zero frequency. If it happens at zero frequency, it could correspond to a situation where, you see, instead of having a profile which is time independent, you would rather go to a situation where you have where you prefer to spend a fraction of the time here and fraction of the time there. But the case I know where you have something time dependent is that it's on a ring where the optimal profile on one side of the transition is flat, and then on the other side of the transition, then it becomes like a sine, and this sine starts to move at a certain velocity. And so this means that if you sit at a given place, you see something which is time dependent with a frequency related to this velocity. It's in a case which is slightly more complicated, where you put a small field on top of it, but it's essentially, and then you can calculate the phase transition, you can even go slightly beyond the phase transition. Okay. Now, just let me finish with all this macroscopic approach, and let me just say some kind of open questions I have. In fact, I have a number of open questions. I just list a few of them. And okay, so I'm sure that there are many more, but one of them, in fact, one of them on which we are trying to work with 3D, so it's half open. And it has to do with seeing how the conditioning on, for example, on the current affects the fluctuation in the density. So, for example, if you condition over a certain time to see a certain current, so you say that the typical current would be J star, and then you want to observe a current J1 over this time period. So typically, the thing will do something like that. The current you would observe as a function of time will be like this. Now, you can really ask, okay, what is this curve? How this curve is reached? What are the fluctuations here? What are the fluctuations there? What is the large deviation condition on the current? and this kind of question. So as I said, this is something we are working on, and we have some partial results that as soon as these lectures are finished, we will try to put, to write them together. There is another question we try to think about, which I was interested in. You see, here I said somehow, at least if you assume that the optimal density and current profile is time independent, then you can tell what the large deviation function is. And in order to play with fluctuation theorem and so on, it would be interesting to consider situations where you have more than two contacts. So let's say I have a third reservoir here with density ρ3. And then I can look at the correlations between the current going from here to there and the current going from here to there. There will be some Onsager relations, but you might try to understand that. And it turns out that the trick that I have shown here, that is that I can relate to the one-dimensional problem, does not seem to work. And so it would be nice just to be able even to find the optimum time-independent profile in situations where you have three contacts or more contacts in higher dimension. And this, I don't know how to do. No, okay, I did not enter into this detail, but if you really want to do it, it's much better to put a contact, not a point, because of the singularities of the Laplacian. You know, the Laplacian is singular at the origin and so on. So let's say you have a contact which is not a point. And this is, of course, okay, this is something maybe too specialized that I did not want to discuss here. Now, in my opinion also, you see, I find it surprising that there are a number of results that can be obtained by the microscopic approach, and still they are not understood from the macroscopic approach. So let me give you two of them. And one is, if you take the infinite line, then one knows what is the probability for exclusion process, what is the probability of observing a certain current qt at time t, and my very first lecture, I gave a formula for that, or for the generating function of this. And this is obtained by microscopic approach. And in principle, the macroscopic fluctuation theory, one can write which equation to solve to obtain this quantity. But as far as I can tell, people have not been able to really recover this result. And there is a very recent result also by Kiron Malik and his collaborators, and it's about, you have a one-dimensional simple exclusion process, and then you take a tagged particle, so you just color the particle, but it has exactly the same dynamics as the other particles, and you ask what the probability that this particle will go a certain distance x of t at time t. So you follow it, and you ask what is the distribution of its position, and this also has been solved by Better and Zatz from the microscopic level, but still, and also you can write equations using the macroscopic fluctuation theory, but as far as I can tell, no one can solve these equations at the moment, except there is a group in Israel who was able to get the tail of this distribution, but not more than that. And I am surprised that, you see, you know the answer and you cannot recover it. And the reverse is true. Sorry? Yes. Okay, so now let me come to the microscopic approach.
Given that and follow the action, can you comment on the generating functional for the same problem?
Okay, it contains the same information.
But we have a form for that as well, right?
Yes, you could. Yes, I think it contains exactly the same information. So sometimes you prefer to work with the functional, There's a generating function, sometimes action. I think it contains. So when you really do the calculation, sometimes you prefer to take the generating function. Yes, but you see the large deviation function of density. Okay, if you were able to say, what you see, if you were able to say at time 0 I have a certain density profile, rho of x and 0. At time t I have another profile, rho of x and t. What is the probability of going from here to there if you had a closed expression, which is not to say I have to sum over all paths and so on. If you had a closed expression, you could extract the position of the tagged particle. But unfortunately, it's not explicit enough that you can recover anything, as far as I can tell. Maybe you can, but I'm sure it's a very interesting question. So, okay, so let me just come to the microscopic approach. Now, here, you see, we have, okay, you have a system in contact with 2 heat baths or 2 reservoirs. And, okay, usually, if you remember elementary courses on statistical mechanics, when you say that the system is at equilibrium at temperature T, then you say that the probability of any configuration is given by the Boltzmann weight. Okay, K is 1, okay, but and that's it. And so this means that how it's connected precisely to the reservoir does not, you don't care about it. At equilibrium, you just use this formula and then you continue. Now, if you are out of equilibrium, it's clear that you need to say precisely how these reservoirs are working. And you see, if I just picture, it's clear I could make the link here very weak. If I make it very weak, the system will resemble the system at temperature T1. If I make it very weak there, it will resemble at temperature T2. So there is not any hope to write a formula of this kind with only T1 and T2. It will depend on the contact, and you have to do it precisely. So what you need is to make a model for the reservoirs. And of course, if it's microscopic, you also need to do a model for the internal dynamics. Okay, so for the internal dynamics, the simplest models that you can imagine is just a system which evolves according to Newton's law. So, for example, you take hard spheres and then you look at the collision between these hard spheres and it's deterministic. Or you can take particles which interact with some potential and you write Newton's law, and this is typically deterministic. So you have, for example, hard spheres, whatever. Okay, you imagine particles with interactions, and this is deterministic. It's what you would like to do. Now, when you use the reservoirs in the community of non-equilibrium systems, there are some people who have deterministic reservoir or heat baths, and there are some people who prefer, and in fact, it's stochastic heat baths. Now, I am not going to discuss these things in great detail, it's just to give you an idea. So how the deterministic heat baths are working. Okay, imagine, for example, I take a gas, and then, so my system would be like this. And then I have my gas here, and for example, spheres or whatever, and then they collide. And then whenever a spheres enter here, they add to them a non-conservative force, a force which will keep the kinetic energy of all the particles in this region to be exactly what they would be for okay, for example, you take an isokinetic, so you fix the kinetic energy of the particle in this region. So essentially you add a conservative force to the motion in order that the total kinetic energy of this particle is what it would be at temperature T1, and here temperature T2. So this can be done, you can even do some simulation with it, but I think it's essentially impossible to do any calculation, which is to if you want at the end to tell what is the average current system when you do this. This is a problem, it's too complicated, essentially just because even, you see, when you have art spheres colliding, it's a very difficult problem to calculate, even knowing whether the dynamics is ergodic inside or not, it's a problem. So this approach with deterministic baths, maybe it has some advantage because you avoid adding noise to the system, but on the other hand, it makes, for the physicists, the calculation essentially impossible. Now, if you take stochastic heat baths, okay, stochastic heat baths, it would be essentially the same dynamics inside, but when a particle comes in this region, for example, there are many ways of doing it, but one way is just at a certain rate, you update its velocity in order to equilibrate it with the Boltzmann distribution with the Maxwellian. So you take one part, at a certain rate, you choose, you take particles, and then you update their velocity to become Maxwellian. And then this will keep the energy here close to the equilibrium energy at temperature T1, here at temperature T2, and then you can try to look at the flux of energy. But even that is still very difficult because of the usual difficulties you have with deterministic dynamics, whether to know whether it's ergodic and all these things. And so essentially, most of the calculations that people do are having stochastic dynamics and stochastic dynamics inside and stochastic reservoir. It's essentially, most of the approaches belong to this category. I hope you see there are experts in the audience, much better experts than me, so I hope they agree with what I said. And for example, the model that Cédric Bernardin showed us, you see you have some stochasticity at the microscopic level. The approach of Spohn also, which is this nonlinear fluctuating hydrodynamics, also you have some noise, and essentially all the problems people can do really some work are of this kind. And of course, the exclusion process belongs to this category because in the exclusion process, the internal dynamics is just that particles just make jumps. So it's really a stochastic model. But so essentially all the problems that people look at are stochastic, both at the microscopy for the internal dynamics and for the heat baths. Now, even if stochastic dynamics, you have all kinds of stochastic dynamics you can imagine, and the simplest one is when you take a Markov process. And if you take the exclusion process or many lattice gas models with more complicated interactions, you end with looking at a Markov process. So now I'm going to discuss a Markov process, which are some elementary things about this kind of models, so something rather general, and then I will show you. Then I will show you how to do it for the case of the exclusion process using the Bethe ansatz, because maybe some people are not familiar with this in the audience. Okay, so. Imagine I take a one-dimensional simple exclusion process, or any over lattice gas, then as long as, for example, the number of particles on each side cannot be infinite, let's take a finite number of particles at most on each side, then there are finite number of configurations. So for the exclusion process, if you have L sites, you have 2VL possible configurations. And once the model is given, then essentially the dynamics is just a Markov process. So if you take a continuous time dynamics, you have just a single matrix, C prime dt, okay, C prime C dt, and I take this equation. This is just the probability of jumping from C to C prime during dt. And essentially, that's the only thing you have. It's just this probability. So if you have two sides, it would be a 4x4 matrix. You write this matrix, and now you want to understand all the quantities that we have discussed, the large deviation, and so on for this Markov process. And of course, the difficulty is that the size of the matrix grows very fast to the system size. And so if you are interested in large systems, of course, life will be difficult. Now, as we learn all at school, then if you have a Markov process, then the probability of being in configuration C at time t satisfy what's called the master equation, C prime M of C prime Pt of C prime minus M of C prime C Pt of C. So this is called master equation. And one knows that under some condition on the Markov process, which are satisfied here, which are the condition of the Perron-Frobenius, and this condition is essentially that there is a path from E configuration to E over configuration. Pt of C, if I wait long enough, will go to some fixed distribution. This is a steady state distribution. In the long time limit. Okay. Now, one difficulty is that in general, we don't have any explicit expression for this distribution. There is one case, which is well known, that if the Markov process satisfies detailed balance, then detailed balance just means that M of C prime times exponential E of C prime over T is, okay, all this is of course very well known, C exponential minus E of C and T. Then in this case, E star of C is just the Boltzmann weight. So this is, I think, in all textbooks, they talk about that. When you do Monte Carlo simulations and so on, you use this property. And so in this case, you know, but this having detailed balance means really that the system is at equilibrium. Now, when you are out of equilibrium, in general, this thing is not known. That is, when I say not known, is that, of course, it's a fit point of this evolution, but otherwise you don't have a closed expression. Okay, so assume that you can do it, and of course if you have a computer, there is no problem, at least as long as the matrix is not too large, you can compute the steady state. And now let me discuss large deviation for this problem. Now, the first quantity we looked at, we discussed in large deviation function is what's the probability of observing a certain density profile rho of x. So if I have a finite system like this, I want, for example, I have a large system, and I want to say to cut it in a few boxes, and I say, what is the probability that I have N1 particle in the first box, N2, and Nk? Let's say I cut it into K boxes. So instead of having the density profile, I would specify the number of particles in each box, and then if I can do it for arbitrary size, then I would have this. Now, it's clear that what it will be just sum over all the configurations with N1 of C, N2 of C, Nk of C fixed, given, of this P star of C. So if I know, no, I have put the star, yes. If I know the steady state, essentially, I get the large deviation function here. And you see that at some stage, I don't know whether you are, but I said that for large system, you expect a large deviation function of this kind, and I say that this is an extension of the notion of free energy for a system out of equilibrium. But under this form, you see it very well, that P star is the extension of the Boltzmann weight, and you are summing Boltzmann weights for a number of configurations compatible with the number of particles there. So clearly it's something like the free energy, this F. Okay, so this is one thing you can do. Now, if you want the empirical measure, what you have to do, and I'm going to show you, is that you have to deform, then you have to deform the matrix, the Markov matrix. So let me, okay, so for the probability of observing a single profile, that's okay. Now, imagine I want the empirical measure of the density. So I have my large system here, and for each configuration, I have a certain number of particles in this small box. Maybe I'm interested in what happens in this small box. Here, this is the number of particles that when I am in configuration, see I have in this box. Then, if I look at time t, the number of particles, the empirical measure of the number of particles I observe in this box will be just sum over all configuration, time, here the time t of c, that is the time spent in C, and here it's the number of particles in this box in the configuration C. You see, I look at a very long time, so the system will jump between all these configurations. It will spend a certain part of this capital time t into the configuration. So if I sum over all configurations, of course, I get capital T. And so this is the quantity. And of course, if I am interested not in the number of particles in this single box, but I want the number of particles in the first box, the cave box, and so on, then here I put, I am going to have a vector. The number of particles in the boxes will be a vector, n1 of C, n2 of C, and so on. And so the empirical number of particles in all the boxes will be a vector which is given by this formula. And so here I am talking about the number of particles in each boxes, but essentially you can imagine that you have somehow a more general quantity QRT, which would be just C times the time spent in the configuration here, and then a certain A of C, whatever it is, whether you count the number of particles or you count whatever you want. And then you want the large function, so this would be the empirical measure. And then the goal, you like to know, you want to know the probability that this vector Qt divided by t takes a certain empirical value. This will be a large deviation function t times a certain f of q, and a large deviation function like this. Okay, so how can you compute it from the Markov process? And what you have to do, I'm sorry for people who know that in the audience, of course, all this is very well known, is that what happens is that this Markov matrix will become deformed, and then computing this will just be to find the largest eigenvalue of a deformed matrix. So this is what I am going to try to show. So to do that, okay, so let me imagine that I start with some initial condition. I start from a certain configuration. I don't care. Then I consider the following thing. I ask, remember that when I talk about large deviation functions, sometimes it's more convenient to talk about the generating function. So let's try to compute the following thing, that exponential lambda, the parameter for my generating function, so it's my choice to decide what lambda is. So I want to consider what's the probability, what is this quantity given that the system at time t is in configuration Ct. Okay, and this I call it P tilde of C. Okay, so it's not the probability. Okay, so it's this quantity. Okay, sorry, it's okay, so the problem. Sorry, my notes are not correct. Actually, it's delta of C. So okay, so I want to average over the stochastic process exponential lambda qt, and I want also the system to be in configuration t. So if lambda equals 0, this is just pt of c. It's just the probability of finding the system in configuration C. And when lambda it's non-zero, it's a different quantity. So I don't know why I made this mistake here. Now, you take this and you look at what happens during a very small time interval, dt. So you say how this is transformed when you go from t time t plus dt. Now, when I go from time t to t plus dt, then there are several things which can happen. The system can jump from one configuration to the other. And of course, when I go from time t to t plus dt, then the quantity qt evolves a little bit, because at least it is in the configuration C, and the time t of C of that particular configuration will evolve. So when you take that into account, it's a rather simple calculation to do. Then you find that the evolution is something like that. Of C times p tilde of C, and then plus the thing you had before, C prime, M of C, C prime, P tilde of C prime minus M of C prime C, P tilde of C. Okay, so the equation is essentially like Markov, like the master equation evolution that we had, but there is an extra term here. And then the thing you want to do is to solve it. Now, if you specify the initial condition, whatever initial condition you take, then it would still be evolved like this. Now, this I can write it as, just to simplify the notation, as a certain big matrix, which is written here, which depends on lambda of C prime, P tilde of C prime. And and the matrix is essentially the Markov matrix, and it's deformed by this coefficient here. Now, I am interested in what happens in the long time limit. I want the probability of Qt, when T is very large. So I want T to be very large in this thing. And what happens if you have a vector, you multiply it by a matrix, you let it evolve for a very long time, then it will select the largest eigenvalue. You see, if you decompose the vector here into the eigenvectors, then of course the one which has the largest eigenvalue will grow faster than the others, and all the rest will be lost. So essentially, in the long time limit, when T is large, P tilde of C be like exponential mu of R times T times lambda of Ct times somehow in the long time limit, the way you can think of it is that you decompose the initial configuration, the probability of being in the initial configuration on the eigen vectors of this matrix, and in the long time limit, only the largest eigenvalue of the largest eigenvalue are selected, and what you are left with are just prefactors which are due to the initial and the final condition, and it is just due to the projection on the eigenvectors, so you get something like this. So what you see is, for example, in the long time limit, the probability of being in configuration Ct, essentially up to a prefactor here, which does not depend on Ct, it will be this. Now, so you see, you have a Markov process, you get a deformed matrix, and then the only thing you need for the large deviation function is the largest eigenvalue of the deformed matrix, and maybe if you want some more information, you get the left and the right eigenvector. Okay, so from this we see that whatever you choose for the initial condition or for the final condition, then exponential lambda Qt will behave like exponential mu of lambda in T. So if you just know the largest eigenvalue of this deformed matrix, already you have the large deviation function. You don't need anything else. But you can also try to see what information you get from these vectors. And I am not going to go into the details, but let me just mention it. Imagine that, for example, I have this empirical measure, so I am measuring things between time 0 and t, and you remember that I have drawn this picture many times. Rho of x and tau will look something like that. It will be in the steady state, rho of x. It will try to achieve the density profile, the empirical density profile that I want to look at. And the probability of this, I will be able to extract from the largest eigenvalue here. But for example, if you ask, okay, when I do this, where does the system sit at the final time, at the time I finish? And the time I finish, the probability distribution of this final time is just given by this left eigenvector. And the right eigenvector, I hope I think presumably I the left and the right in this story, but it does not matter really. But anyway, okay. So, no. I think, okay, if you take this notation correctly, it would be given by this quantity here. But it turns out that this quantity is the left eigenvector of the matrix. Okay, it does not matter. There is a left, there is a right. If you sit and you are careful, you do it. And then the main message is that, for example, if you know this vector, you can tell what's the measure here. Not only the average point, but all its fluctuation. If you know the other one, at least you can tell about this. And if you know both, you can tell about the fluctuation around here. And this is the kind of things that we are playing with 3D.
This was for the current.
No, that's, at the moment I am discussing the density. This means.
Your A belongs to.
So here I'm just, okay, so here, yes. No, okay, that's for the density. So I just ask, okay, so let me forget the vector. I just ask, I have my system and configuration as a number of particles in this box. And I am interested in the empirical measure of the number of particles in this box.
But here you are calculating QT.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I call it Q, I wrote N, and then I said I could consider a more general quantity, which would be of this kind, A of C times the time C. I'm going to talk about current just right now, but here it's just essentially the density. So, yes. I'm sorry, I call it QT because it's just quantity. It's not a current. It's just. You could constrain or not constrain. You can ask this question even in a system of one side. Okay, I have one side. Ask what is NT would be just how long for how long I saw this site occupied over time, and this has a large deviation function. So you don't need to constrain. You can do it for whatever. Now I'm sorry. Yes, I realize that. I call QT, in all the lectures so far, I had called QT the flux of particles, and now I call it a general quantity. Okay, so this is the way you have to deform it. Now, if you want to talk about, so now I make it as a remark, but the story is exactly the same, is that if instead of looking at the empirical measure of the density, you want the empirical measure of the current. Now, the current gets modified each time you have a jump from a configuration to another configuration. So if I want the empirical measure of the current, then the quantity I want to consider is a quantity like this, is Qt equals sum over C prime, a certain B of C prime, number of jumps from C prime to C. Okay, so this, for example, I have my exclusion process, and I want to count the current Qt through this bond. Now, the system jumps from configuration to configuration, and I can look at how many jumps I have observed during time capital T from C prime to C. So this is just the empirical number of jumps I have seen. So you see, and this, of course, is a number which fluctuates. Now, some of these jumps do not contribute to this current, because, for example, a particle which is here decides to jump there, it has no contribution. So for these jumps from the configuration where this particle moved, then B of C as C prime will be 0. And some jumps will contribute to this current with a positive. So if a particle is here, jumps to the right, it will contribute with a B equal 1. If a particle is on the right and jumps on the left, it will contribute to B equal -1. And of course, if you have more complicated dynamics, you would always be able to write this. So the story is very, very similar to what I said for the density. And then what you get is that the evolution of P tilde of C will be just given by sum over C prime, and then here you would have lambda B of C, C prime, M of C, C prime, P tilde of C prime, minus M of C prime C, P tilde of C. Okay, and the exponential is just here in the first term, it's not in the second term. So again, it's once I have written this, the way to derive it is very similar to what I wrote here. That is, I have to define this generating function, see how it evolves, and when I end up with a certain matrix which depends on lambda. Instead of being this matrix, it's the one which is there, and the rest is exactly the same, and so I can do the large deviation for the current exactly as I did it for the densities. Okay, so all this is for a Markov process. Now, because there is a question which was raised yesterday, I just want to say it, just to make a remark that you can do it, for example, for Langevin equations. And yesterday I mentioned briefly the following question. So it was dot equals f of q plus eta, and then you remember, for example, I mentioned a case where you have several minima and so on, and then you know that when you have a Langevin equation, you can write the Fokker-Planck equation for q. So dp over t equals f of q dp over dq plus squared over 2, or epsilon over 2. Okay, so this is the usual Fokker-Planck equation. Now, if you are interested in the large deviation of the density, that is, you want to condition on the fact that q of t over a long interval is equal to q1, then you will deform exactly as we have done it. Here, you are going to deform the Fokker-Planck equation. So there will be something like lambda q on top of it. So you have to deform it. This is the way it is deformed, if I made it right. And then what you have to do is that instead of looking at the largest eigenvalue of a matrix, you want to find a kind of ground state or top eigenvalue of these operators, which is very much like Schrödinger operator. And you see, epsilon goes to 0 in that lots of I told about today has to do, looks like the WKB approximation. And of course, you know that when you have situations like that, you have to do at instantons and in the WKB approximation and all that. So the story is exactly the same, whether you look at the Langevin equation or yes. Okay, so now let me just come to the main tool. Okay, there are cases that you can solve. For example, non-interacting particles and so on. This is very easy, and I don't want to discuss this microscopic model, but I think the main tool that people been using to solve this microscopic model is called the better ansatz. So I want to just explain with words what it is. And you see, it was invented for quantum system to solve quantum chains in the 30s by Bethe. So it's a long time ago, but more recently, about 40 years ago, when I started to learn better. And I remember a discussion with another student, and I said, she said, what do you do? And I said, I am learning better than that. She told me it's 40 years old, so why do you care about such old things? But I think what she was working on is probably out interest now, but still lots of people are using better than that, and it has produced wonderful results. So, okay, so the better than that is just to try to calculate the eigenvalues of this deformed operator, this deformed matrix. Now, let me just look at very simple situations, and then we will see how it works. Now, there are two situations you can imagine. You have either the infinite line, or you have the ring. Now, let me look at the master equation and say, for example, the deformed master equation on the infinite line in the case where I have only a single particle. So I have this particle, it's a symmetric exclusion process, but there is no other particle. So the fact that there is exclusion does not matter. And then if you look at the deformed problem like this, time you jump to the right, you get an exponential lambda, here exponential minus lambda. So the deformed matrix is dp over dt, is dp of x. So I work on the infinite line, is exponential minus lambda p of x plus 1 plus minus 2p of x. Okay, that's really for matrix, that's really very simple. But if I start with initial condition x at time 0 is y, then I can solve this problem immediately with just a random walk. And the answer is the following. It will be that pt of x and y, okay, there are many ways of writing it, but one way of writing it is dz over 2 I pi z times exponential minus lambda z plus exponential, sorry, there is a plus here, lambda over z minus 2 times t times zx minus 1. Okay, so this is one way of writing the solution here for the problem on the an infinite. Okay, this is just a random walk problem, so that's not a big achievement. And of course, if you were doing on a ring, then you would like that p of x plus L equals p of x, just by periodic boundary conditions. So it would tell you that you should not sum integrate over all z, but sorry, here it's a contour, you can take whatever contour. Let's take a contour with a radius r, and the r, I take it very small. It's what people do just to avoid some difficulties, but it turns out that this would be true for any contour at this level. So then you would have periodic boundary condition, and this would be able to get. Okay, so one particle is very simple to solve. Now, what is the better ansatz? The better ansatz starts with particles. So imagine I have two particles. Then the master equation will be dp, so I have particle position x1 and x2, it will be dpx1 x2 over dt equals, there is this exponential minus lambda. Okay, a number of terms, x1, x1, x2 plus 1, plus exponential lambda p of this of x 2 plus 2 minus 1 minus 4p of x1, x2. Now, the first thing you can notice is that this equation is exactly the same as if the two particles would not interact. If the particle, if I was looking at the non-interacting problem, then this would be valid everywhere. When you look at the exclusion process, then this equation is only valid as long as x2 minus x1 is larger than 1. As long as they are far enough, each one they can move independently. Now, when x2 minus x1 is 1, then the equation has to be modified. And the way it is modified is that, in fact, maybe I don't need to rewrite it. The way it is modified is that this 4 becomes 2. So in this case, that x2, so it's not possible to come from the situation where the two particles were together, so this is not there. And it's not possible also, x2 is equal to x1, then this would correspond to situations where the two particles are on the same side, and the reason why the 4 became 2 is that the two particles are sitting next to each other, and so the only jumps is this one jumps here, jumps there, but there are two over jumps which become forbidden. So essentially, you have the same equation, but you have this special situation to consider. Now, what is the PT of x and y? Okay, of course, it will become a function of two variables. It will be that pt of x1, x2 given x1, x2 given y1, y2. Okay, it will be essentially the same as here, but with a small change. So let me write it. It will be of the form 1 over I integral dz1, integral d2, then there is the exponential, which is the same as there, exponential minus lambda z1 plus z2, plus exponential lambda 1 over z1 plus 1 over z2, minus 4 times t. And then the main difference, okay, it is of this form, z1 to the power x1 minus y1, z2 x2 minus y2, but instead of being what it was before, so this would be, what I have written so far would be just if the particles don't see each other at all. You see, that's the solution, and that's it. And then you can imagine how to generalize to an arbitrary number of solutions. Now, the better on that is to say, okay, let me put an amplitude here, and then put an amplitude where I exchange Z1 and Z2 here. So A to 1, Z1 or Z2 x1 minus y1, Z1 x2 minus y2. Okay, so as I said, for non-interacting particles, this is the solution. Clearly, because the role of Z1 and Z2 is totally symmetric, for non-interacting particles, this would also be a solution. So the first part of the master equation, which is here, it's automatically satisfied. Now the question is, I want to satisfy this constraint. And so you take this form, you put it in, and then you see what comes out. And what comes out is that, yes, you can satisfy the constraint, the red constraint, provided one thing, that 1, 2, and A21 are linked by a formula. And the formula, I write it here for this case. It will be, okay, I recovered it yesterday by Mathematica, but it's okay, it's really a few lines. Exponential minus 2 lambda Z1 plus Z1, Z2, A12. Okay, so this, if the two parameters satisfy this equation, that's it. You get the solution of the master equation, which is there. Okay. So this is, of course, I have done 2 particles. Now, what about 3 particles? Now, 3 particles, instead of having 2 terms here, you have 6 terms, all the permutations. You see, when you have 3 particles, you would have Z1, Z2, Z3, and so you would have same story with A123, A213, and so on. You have 6 parameters, 6 amplitudes. And of course, the 6 amplitudes, when the particles are far away, it is always a solution for an arbitrary choices of these A's. And then you have to make sure that when particle, you have the 3 particles, X1, X2, X3, then you have to make sure that when the 2 particles here come together, you satisfy the formula, which is like this red one, where the 2 particles are together, so the formula is modified. When you try to see whether it's satisfied, then you get results this. Same formula. With A21, you have exchanged particles 2 and 1, or you have broke together particles 2 and 1, and then the amplitude satisfies this. And so you get formulas that these amplitudes should satisfy. And the better on that is when all these formulas are consistent. That is, you write them and you are sure that they are consistent. Now, let me just explain something which is, in fact, at the heart of this theory, whether a system can be solved by the better ansatz or not, is that, you see, what happens is that you are doing some permutation. So you are, essentially, you are relating amplitude for a permutation, amplitude for another permutation where you have exchanged 2 indices. So I have, say, amplitude A1 to 3, and here I have amplitude A3 to 1. Now, I want to go from here to here by changing pairs. So I can do it in different ways. I can go through A, and that's a go here. And along this path, I will say that the amplitudes are related by a factor like this. So I have a certain product of factors going from here to there. Or I could do it by going from A3, 1, 2, then A1, 3, 2, and then here. And here I would get a factor, here a factor, here a factor. And then it's not clear in advance that when I follow this path, or when I follow that path, I would get the same result. You see, I have 2 different ways of computing this by doing permutation. And when it happens that what you do using these 2 paths agree, which is in fact what happens here, then you have the solution of the 3 particle problem, and you have the solution for all particle problems. That is, now if I have not 3 particles but more, then I have to sum over all permutations, and so I get a huge, terrible thing, but still I am able to get the eigenvalue of the matrix. So this is really the heart of the better ansatz. Now, when you do it on a ring, on top of it, you have to be sure that P of x1, x2, x3 is equal to P of x2, x3, x1 plus L. You see, just because of periodic boundary condition. And exactly as I had here some condition on the Z1, then you get some conditions, so the Z1, Z2, Z3, which are in fact what is called the Bethe-Ansatz equation, and which allow to compute the largest eigenvalue that I want to calculate, and the largest eigenvalue is given on the ring by this formula. So the mu of lambda on the ring, you see in the long time limit, you see that it's essentially the largest value here which counts, and so this is a way to compute it. Of course, it gives you a flavor of the story. Now, when you are on the ring, Zi satisfies some constraint. You see, and so you have to write, you see, here I wrote the simplest one, which is ZL equal 1. But when you are on the ring, you get coupled equation for Z1 and Z2, and the largest eigenvalue that you have to take the equation that the Zi satisfy and to put it here, and you get the largest eigenvalue. Now, if you work in it system, there is no reason that the single largest eigenvalue dominates, because there are eigenvalues as close as you want, and then you need to use this formula. So both things are done. So in fact, when you do that, yes. What? Okay, so if I don't put, okay, so here I have condition on the current or something like that, so I have this parameter lambda. If I don't care about the lambda, I just want to look at the evolution without conditioning, I would put lambda equals 0 here. And then this would be this would really be the probability distribution that I start with two particles here and I end up with them there. So you see, if you don't deform the matrix, it's just a Markov matrix. If you deform it, it's no longer Markov, but the only difference is that there is this lambda. Markov, no, it's not a Markov. Yes, if it was a Markov matrix, the eigenvalue, largest eigenvalue is 0. Okay, I am talking the largest, the one which has the largest real part. So it would be 0. No, okay. Okay, so let me just finish with the Bethe-Ansatz. Of course, it gives you a flavor, and one could give more detail, but I think the heart is really what I said. You start with one particle, you think you can solve the two particles, you get this relation between the amplitude, which is really simple algebra. You see, it's a few lines of calculations, and then you jump to an arbitrary number of particles, and you realize that the amplitude, the relation between amplitudes are the same, and the only thing you need to check are that you see these different paths gives the same answer. Okay, so I am coming to the end. The last thing I want to say on the Bethe-Ansatz, one thing is to compute the largest eigenvalue, which is the easiest thing to do, although it's not easy, it's the easiest thing to do. And especially what's not easy is that, for example, when you are on a ring, you have coupled equations for the Zi, and then you have to do something with it. In some cases, one can do it, and also so you want to take the thermodynamic limit. What is much more difficult is to get the eigenvectors in the large size behavior, because it turns out, you see that what the eigenvector will look like, it will be the sum over all these permutations. And then, so the most naive thing would be to say, okay, I have this very long sum, and maybe there is one term which dominates. But in fact, in this sum, there are signs everywhere. So it's a sum of things which change signs. So there is no way that you can guess what is, okay, I think this is, to me, in the context of these problems, this is really a difficult question. Even if you have an explicit form of the eigenvector, how you extract the large system size limit. Okay, so this is essentially all I wanted to say. I promise that I am going to mention some open questions. So let me say that first, there is one really open question I find very important, which is how to expand all these things to mechanical systems, even like models that Cedric discussed. I think it would be very interesting. The computing the large deviation function of the density of the current and everything. What I have just said is that there are a number of situations where one can use the Bethe-Ansatz, but we can write the eigenvector and the eigenvalues, but taking the large system size limit is difficult enough that one doesn't know, maybe Alexandre knows the answer, but one does not know how to recover what one gets from the macroscopic fluctuation theory. So there are some results which in principle one should be able to get by the Bethe-Ansatz, but one can write the Bethe-Ansatz, but one cannot extract, as far as I can tell at the moment, enough information to connect it to the macroscopic fluctuation theory. Okay, so this is more or less what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Okay, so there is, for the exclusion process, simple symmetric exclusion or even asymmetric. In fact, the steady-state distribution is just product measure. It's just particles are placed anywhere. As soon as you condition on the current, it's a measure, and as far as I can tell, this measure is unknown. It's only known if you condition on a very, very strong current by Schutz, who showed that the measure is a measure of free fermions. I don't know, if you are not a physicist, I don't know whether it means something to you, but essentially it means that the particles repel each other. It's not that they are not correlated, they repel each other. In order to flow a big current, you want them to be as far as possible so they move fast, it's easier to move.
So it's a kind of dilation space.
We see the way we talked about it is that we wrote the equation to solve. We did not know how to solve, and then we found that this was a way to solve them. And you see, it's very surprising because it gives, for example, something that we could see in simulation is the following. If you take a 1D system and you measure this thing. So this is the average current, and this is the variance of the average current. Okay? For large system, it's independent of size. It's a number which is independent of size. It's independent of dimension. It's a function of rho A and rho B, but does not depend on the dimension, for example. Of course, it does not depend on the shape of what you do. Okay, so this is due to this thing. This is what happened, and I tried. You see, when I say I have 3 contacts, I tried to see whether there is something which generalizes that. For example, which would say, imagine I know how to solve the 2-dimensional problem with 3 contacts. Can I say something about any dimensional system with 3 contacts, knowing this solution? Exactly like when you have 2 contacts connected to a 1-dimensional system, maybe 3 contacts we need to connect it, but I don't know. But okay, so really what you need to do is first, what I said, that is written in the infinite space. On the finite space, the integrals are replaced by sums, but it's not just sums that you see, the Zi satisfies some equations, so you have to put the equations there. Whether one can see, I don't see it immediately, why in the long time limit you take the largest eigenvalue, it becomes what you said. I don't see it immediately, but okay, I suppose it is true. Maybe by looking at it a little more carefully one sees, but I cannot see it immediately. Okay.